Hello, welcome to today's Cyber Threat Report. Today is Thursday, August 4th, 2011, and today I thought we'd spend a little extra time in introducing the participants we have on this program. First is John Hogoboom joining us. John is a recognized security expert analyst and as well as a very good analyst tool developer. Welcome, John. What do you plan to talk about today?
Thanks, Brian. Today I have some stuff to talk about with APT, and we'll go over the wallboard stuff that we usually go over.
All right, good. Also joining us is Dave Gross. Dave is a senior incident response analyst and lead for our malware analysis activities. Welcome, Dave. What do you plan to discuss today?
Thanks, Brian. What I'm going to talk about is a Android app that allows recording of phone calls, potentially surreptitiously.
Oh, that should be interesting. And also joining us is Josh Lackey. Josh is a member of our Mobility Security Research and Assessment team. Josh, I understand Black Hat, you reported on that a couple of weeks ago. Black Hat's in progress now. Are there any revelations yet?
Well, we're watching it. There's some interesting things going on. Nothing major to talk about today. I'm here mostly to heckle the other speakers. So.
Okay, we welcome you to do that. Thanks. And I'm Brian Rexroad. My role generally is to help take the things that we learn from our threat analysis and use that to help improve our services and ultimately help our customers. So, first of all, if you have any feedback or if you have questions or recommendations on topics we should cover, you can contact us at cyberthreat@list.att.com. There should be a link from the web page where the cyber threat is posted on the Tech Channel portal. And I'll also sort of open the discussion here today. We'll, again, cover first, I'll cover some security tips for app users so that we can get a little better idea how you can protect yourself from malicious apps. As David said, we'll talk a little bit about that Android Trojan that does the voice recording. We have a follow-up. We had discussed APT, that is Advanced Persistent Threats, a little bit last week. We have a follow-up on that, on some new reports that have come out related to those topics, and we'll cover the internet weather. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started. We'll talk about a recent blog that I had posted, 9 security tips for the application consumer. And actually, the title of the blog is Apps versus Oranges and the Occasional Bad Banana. This blog is available from the AT&T Network Exchange blog site. That's networkingexchangeblog.att.com. And I think there's also a link from the space where this on the Tech Channel, that is at techchannel.att.com, where these cyber threat reports are posted. I think there's a link for my name to be able to get to this blog. But we'll go ahead and summarize the blog with you here today. And really the notion here is to provide some information to help users of apps help protect themselves from what potentially could be malicious apps, some practices to take into account. And I started out actually with 9 recommendations in the blog, but in developing this cyber threat report today, we ended up with another one, partly based on some experiences we've had with some recent, what we consider to be malicious apps. So the first one here is to use reputable app stores. That is, by going to reputable app stores, they have an interest in protecting their reputation and doing some vetting of applications to make sure that they are not of a malicious purpose. And if they do turn out to be malicious, there's the opportunity to pull those applications from the store so the exposure to users is minimized. And in some cases, the official app stores have the opportunity to be able to pull applications from end-user mobile devices. And in the context of this discussion here, by the way, we are talking about things like iPhone or iPad, many of the tablet devices, including Android devices, any smart device that's on the market today, Windows as well. Second one would be to only load apps that you need. That is, if you don't have a specific purpose for loading an app, there's not really a good reason to load it on your device. You want to be able to protect yourself from the kinds of things that might cause interference, for example. If the app isn't well designed, it could cause crashes on your device, even though there's sandboxes intended to be in place to protect devices. You don't want things that might be going on in the background that you're not aware of. Third item would be to look at the reviews. That is, when you're evaluating an application, look at the good aspects, the good reviews, but also look at the ones that are at the bottom of the tier, the ones that where there were disappointed users and the concerns that they have with apps. Sometimes there may be information that the app is sharing that they've discovered that you will want to know about.
Yeah, usually I'll look at the negative reviews first. That really gives me a better idea of what to look out for.
Yeah, and as security analysts, that tends to be the first thing on our mind is what bad things can be going on. So I agree with you, Dave. I have the tendency to do that as well. Oftentimes you have to change the way the reviews are sorted to get to the ones at the bottom. Next item would be to, keep in mind that free apps probably are not free. This is a balancing act. That is, the app developers are trying to make their applications lucrative. When I say lucrative, we're talking about trying to earn revenue from them one way or another. If they're providing the app to you for free, then there may be some other mechanism that they're using, possibly related to information that you're sharing with them to help monetize that application. So keep that in mind. They may be selling information about you that's collected about your behaviors or that sort of thing. There is also the opportunity in some cases, and hence the 10th item here, that they may want to sign you up for premium services or more expensive services that require you to pay for them. So that would be something to keep in mind.
On that note, Brian, something else to be wary of, somewhat related to that, is a lot of times what they've been doing with some of this Trojan apps that are out there is they will take a well-known one that has ads in it as its revenue, means of revenue. They'll rebrand one that'll have the same name, but it'll say ad-free version, so that it looks like you're getting a version that you're not going to be nagged with advertisements while you're using it. That's generally a tactic that I've seen, particularly with Android. I think we've seen that quite a bit. So something to watch out for if you are installing an app and it says it's the ad-free version. Think twice. Why would that be? Make sure it's really from that vendor and not from some other third party.
Very good. Thanks, John. That's a good observation. Next item, very important one, is to scrutinize permissions. We found that many of the malicious apps have the tendency to want to ask for permissions to do things, get location information, disclose information about your address book, that sort of thing. Things that some apps really have no really legitimate reason to have that sort of information. So keep that in mind. If they're asking for too many permissions, perhaps that they are trying to get information that you wouldn't want to share with these folks.
All this is really good advice because I think what we're seeing is the majority of people who are getting their phones broken into, it's really because of these malicious applications. So all this advice is really good. And especially the permissions, right? If you've got a game, like a simple little internet game that needs to record audio for some reason, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later on the show, but you really got to think about that, right? Why does this game need permission to record audio? Odds are it's probably doing something dodgy, right? So it's not easy. It's not easy to completely do this and to vet every single app, right? People get lazy and they just install things and, that didn't work, let's go on to the next one, right? But, it's kind of important to at least do some sort of cursory look at these applications you're installing.
Absolutely. So next item, number 6, contribute to the app reviews. If it turns out that you're using an app and you really like it and it seems to be providing good value, you've already checked some of these other items, by all means, give it a good review. But if you find out that it's not doing something that you feel you're comfortable with, make sure that you provide the review back, that is, and rate it appropriately. Because as we had talked about in the third item, that is to look at the reviews, those reviews are dependent on feedback of users, good ones and dissatisfied users. Next item, run anti-malware protection on your device. As we proceed further, more anti-malware, antivirus type products are becoming available for mobile devices. There is a little bit of a penalty to pay for this in the sense that it's going to be using processing resources, run your battery down just a little bit more quickly. But in terms of your safety, protecting your information, we think it's a good thing to do. Next thing is to keep apps up to date. We had talked about this actually in a previous program several weeks ago. It's not just apps themselves, in fact, it's actually the operating system, the device itself. It needs to become routine to consider your mobile device as something that needs to be updated, keep the software up to date, keep your apps up to date as well. And the next item is basically to clean house. That is, if you have apps that you're not using that are loaded on your device, we recommend that you take them off. Apps can run in the background. They can be loaded into your device. They can be doing things in the background, sharing information without you really being aware of that. The best way to deal with that is to make sure that if you have apps that you're not using, take them off the device entirely. So that's the clean house. And then last but not least, read the user agreement. We've found actually in some cases that some of the apps that had what we would describe as malicious intent actually state in there that they are going to sign you up for a premium service where you'll be charged monthly for that service. They do that silently in the background. The assumption is that where a user is going to pay attention to that user agreement and decline if they to install the app if they're not satisfied with that. But we found that has not turned out to be the case. So important to read the user agreement. So those are the 10 items. Hopefully those will be useful to you. As I said, they're available on the Network Exchange blog. Perhaps you can share that with folks in your organization. So the next item, let's talk about the Android Trojan that can record voice calls. How about that, Dave?
All right. Well, there's been concern, and this has been going on for quite a while, where there would be some sort of an app which can either come as a Trojan or be installed by someone else, a friend or someone that is potentially close to you that could get physical access to your device, that would secretly record and upload phone conversations from a mobile device and then allow the installer or the attacker to be able to listen in on some of those calls. One of those apps was described this week by blogs, both by CA Technologies and Symantec. It's an application for Androids, and the name, when you download it, is called Android System Message. Symantec calls it Android.NikiSpy. The idea is that it's an application, and this one is one that, Brian, you were talking about. It's kind of, in the foreground as far as saying up front what it's about. It's available on multiple sites in China, and they're openly advertising it as a way to confirm suspicions of infidelity by tracking the significant other's calls and locations. So it's not really hidden in that respect. And upon installation, the functionality that it's using, you're saying, be careful of what it allows you to do. It indicates it wants to record audio, it wants to intercept outgoing calls, and read the phone state and identity. So those things are indicators that, okay, you're going to be doing stuff with this audio kind of capability and be able to potentially capture that.
Yeah, very good, Dave. That's a very good example of the kinds of things fairly typical of the kinds of things that we've seen where, if you dig into it, you can determine that this is actually probably an application that if you're using it, be prepared to lose anything that you've got on your device, right? Right.
But if somebody can get a hold of your device, especially for a very short period of time, to download this and install, you won't see these warnings. They'll be installed without you seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit outside of the application management aspect, make sure you keep good physical control on your device and, protect it with a PIN when you're not using it, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, Dave, does this one come as a Trojan, or is it more of a spyware type of application that, someone would install on your phone independently?
From what it sounds like, this one in particular looks like it just comes as a spyware kind of application. So it doesn't seem to come with other kinds of games or whatever and, have this as a Trojan in the background. But it could easily be, packaged that way. So there is potential here for doing it in a Trojan way. Right.
There are some other commercial ones that we've seen that have this same kind of functionality. Notably, I think there's like Mobile Spy is one, and Flexi Spy,
yes.
That do very similar and very powerful things in terms of monitoring what someone's doing on their cell phone.
Yes.
So definitely be wary of what apps have been installed on your phone, especially if you don't have physical control of it, like you guys had mentioned.
That's right. And, as time goes on, I'm sure these are going to get refined and they're going to have even more capabilities.
Yeah.
But anyhow, when it gets installed, there is an icon created, and the application is actually known as Speech Recorder. Yeah. But if you have a lot of apps on your phone, you may not notice the new icon that got created somewhere. It's you see the forest, but you don't see the individual tree that says, okay, this is the one that's going to be doing me in.
So that goes right back to Brian's advice earlier to, audit the applications on your phone now and again just to see if perhaps there's something there that you don't want. And this, I think, is a good example. I can't think of a reason why anybody would actually want this on their phone. It doesn't seem to me that it has any sort of good purpose. I mean, you might want to put it on someone else's phone for bad purposes, but I can't think of a reason why I'd want this on my phone. So this is definitely something you should catch during an audit.
Yeah. Right. Although, there are some things like these digital memo recorders. So, for that sort of thing, if it's not associated with a phone conversation, there may be a reason why you would want to do that.
Mm-hmm. And while I don't condone this, I could see that a company who provides company-owned phone devices to their employees might want to install something like this on their phones that they give to their employees to either audit what they're doing or make sure they're not doing things they shouldn't be with their phone. I don't know that I condone that behavior, but I could see some companies might come to that conclusion.
Yep, and plus, there may be some legal aspects to that as well. So
clearly, users would need to be notified if that was taking place to do it legally.
Mm.
Yeah. So very good. Thanks for sharing that with us, Dave. And let me go ahead and pass the ball over to John here. John, we had a little discussion about advanced persistent threats last week. It seems like some more information has come out in the public domain recently.
We did, and one of the things I wanted to clarify that we didn't really maybe clarify well enough last week is that there's a lot of advanced persistent threat activity going on that we've been detecting and notifying customers and some non-customers alike about that we've detected. I would say at least 30 or so over the past year that we've picked up, maybe more, and we've notified those customers of an advanced persistent threat type of infection inside their organization. Recently, I guess this was maybe a couple of days ago, McAfee came out with a report. This is a very interesting report. It actually is a pretty easy read because there's a lot of pretty graphs and pictures in here. But up front, he does have a little bit of discussion of the APT threatscape, what's been going on, how it's kind of gotten the term has not been accurately reported by the press very well. But over time, what they've been doing here is tracking all the various advanced persistent threats that they've been monitoring, and a particular classification of what they're calling shady rat. This happens to be the same one we're pretty sure that we've been monitoring as well in our own activity and notifying on. And I should clarify that when we notify customers, that stuff is not making it into the press. So a lot of people haven't heard about this type of activity or the specifics of this APT type of activity, or at least this particular one, up until now. McAfee has a pretty interesting report, has some timelines in here that mention various victims and oftentimes government agencies that have been penetrated, and the timelines and durations of those intrusions. It's a pretty interesting read. We have the link at the top here of the first slide that you can go reference if you can read it to go take a look at that report. Also yesterday, or maybe it was today. It's today the 4th? Yeah, so it was yesterday. SecureWorks, who also do a lot of security analysis, they released a report kind of in line with this related to a tool called HTRAN. This is another one I would reference that you might want to go take a look at if you're interested in this topic. HTRAN is a tool that it's a lot like Netcat if you're familiar with it. It allows you to bounce network traffic between hosts, so you can kind of hide where you really are by bouncing your traffic through several different hosts, kind of like a proxy, but a little bit more at a raw socket level. Interesting report. They noticed that HTRAN has been used with this particular type of advanced persistent threat, the same one I'm pretty sure that McAfee is reporting and that I know for sure that we've been looking at. So that's another interesting read. I would recommend you take a look at it.
All right, very good. Yeah, thanks, John. I think we did sort of fail to emphasize that a lot of these events that are taking place, a very, very small number of those are actually making it into the press. This sort of exemplifies the fact that there are quite a number of other events that are taking place. I think the point we were trying to make last time is any organization that is a large corporation or has any roles in terms of legislative roles. We've even seen some law firms being targeted here associated with regulatory type activities, that type of thing. They are being targeted in the context of this. So it's not just theft of intellectual property. There are other facets of organizations that are being targeted.
And on the topic of APT, I think we've mentioned this before. It's kind of hard to know that you've been penetrated. Usually they are very low, under-the-radar types of infections. They will only usually penetrate a very small number of victims inside your company. One of the things we have seen, this is not always the case. Something to be watchful for is any kind of suspicious-looking spear-phished email that comes into a small number of individuals in your company. It'll usually on target with the type of business that you're related to, so the subject matter of it will be very plausible for something that your company would be working on, and it will usually have some kind of attachment. We've seen it come in as an Excel spreadsheet, as a PDF, probably some other variations. I think we've seen even a zip with just an executable inside. They all kind of do a very similar thing where they in the background drop a hidden payload piece of Trojan malware onto your machine. Doesn't spread to other people in the company necessarily, but that's how they use to get a foothold inside your company, and that allows remote control access back out to the APT attacker. So kind of hard to detect. They do have some tactics, some domain names that you can go look for, or second-level domain names that you might want to watch for in your DNS traffic. This HTRAN report in particular by SecureWorks is something that you can go reference to go look for some of those names. They mention in this report. It's something to keep an eye out for in your traffic in your company.
All right, good. Thanks, John. So how about we move on and talk a little bit about the internet weather? Would you like to bring that up, John?
Sure. As usual, our recent internet activity anomalies. This is a view of the last 7 days of activity. We have a few things to talk about. First one is we've seen an increase in activity on 4672 UDP. That happens to be eMule. Mostly issues for eMule. I think there's another well-published service or well-known service is remote file access. It's also listed as. We also had several distributed denial of service attacks against a certain particular IP destination address family. It's actually a customer of ours. And then we'll touch base again on the scanning activity that's been going on with TCP port 23, which is Telnet, and TCP port 22, which is SSH. Very similar types of what you would do that gives you remote console access. Just one's encrypted and one is not. The first one we have here is the eMule on 4672 UDP. Have not had a chance to figure out what this is. It looks like peer-to-peer activity. We're pretty sure it is. Makes sense that it would be eMule then, but I don't know why we have such a normalized baseline here for quite an extended period of time, and then it's been increasingly getting more and more aggressive as time goes. I shouldn't say aggressive, but it's been increasing in volume considerably. When we've looked at this, the sources involved here, we're seeing a lot of your typical consumer types of ISP people, DSL modems, your typical cable companies with home users. That would also make sense for a peer-to-peer type of thing. Just not quite sure why it's taking off so much. This is kind of a significant increase in activity here, and we haven't had a chance to figure out why that is. But if you have any thoughts, please let us know.
Have you done any content inspection of the traffic, or is this just looking at the ports and IP addresses?
No, this is just so far just looking at the ports and IP addresses involved. We don't have packet analysis of this type of activity.
Right. So just to put this, qualify it just a little bit here, we don't have really any tangible reason to believe that this is a security issue. Certainly if it were showing up on your enterprise, it might represent some abuse activity. My suspicion is there are some new apps that are on the internet that are becoming available. Perhaps they are associated with mobile devices that, although the activity we're seeing here isn't actually associated with mobility traffic, it's more, as John mentioned, associated with consumers. It could be a new game that's available or new applications that are, using ports that are associated with other applications in this case. So no real strong evidence that it's malicious. It's just that we do like to pay attention to cases where there's an increasing level of activity and make sure that it is not going to interfere with other activities.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.
The next one that we had is some DDoS activity. I think you might have looked into this, Brian. Did you want to talk about this one?
Certainly. This absolutely is something that I've looked into. We've had sort of a repeated sequence of events. The target here for these denial of service attacks has been basically the same target, and this is not what we would measure to be a large denial of service attack. I would put it on the scale of medium-small here. That is, what we're measuring is around 20 million flows per hour in some of these cases. The fact that it's repeating is one of the things that's a little bit bothersome about this particular case. There were some, it looks like, fairly even repeating of attack activity, a little bit of a pause for a couple of days there, and it's resumed, and we are seeing some activity again today. So not a significant issue in terms of interference, but it is something we are paying attention to and are looking at methods that we should be using to mitigate this.
And from the analysis that I was looking at, it definitely is using spoof source IPs all over the map. In 2 million flows, I'm seeing 1.9 million unique source IPs.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the unique aspects of this attack is it's not targeting a particular port. It seems to be spreading the attack traffic across a number of ports. So perhaps this is related to something about the target that they're trying to attack. It's not really a web server that they're targeting, so and maybe that's a reason that they're trying to just basically just be generally disruptive.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next one that we had is we had talked about this last week, and I think the week before as well.
Yes.
Seeing a lot of increased scanning activity on Telnet and SSH. You can see it's kind of normalized itself now. Sources are primarily from Korea, as Brian pointed out last week. And I do see some overlap in many of the sources scanning on both 23 and 22 together. It's not always the case, but I'm definitely seeing that there is some overlap between the guys who are scanning. They're doing both of these ports. It's not so. This is coordinated activity, at least in some measure. I don't know that they're all scanning in conjunction, both ports, but at least a large portion of them are.
Yeah, I suspect that what they're really doing here is they're probing around, looking for IP addresses, and perhaps checking port 23 first, and then perhaps checking port 22 afterward. And our detection algorithm is not as effective when you so many ports down the road here. But certainly it picks up the event activity and is able to support the correlation between the two.
And I highly suspect this is botnet related. In fact, I don't have any doubt of that. I don't know that we've attributed to any particular botnet yet.
That's correct. Yeah, this is a case where the command and control of that botnet may be outside of our purview, but there's no question that it's there.
Okay. And the last one we had is we did post an AT&T Protect alert on Monday. It was. Regarding increased scanning on port 1434 UDP, which is Microsoft SQL Monitor. I don't know that we have any distinct reason why this scanning activity, what they were specifically targeting, other than open Microsoft SQL servers that they might be looking for. I know SQL Slammer worm used to, but that's so old I can't imagine that's related. But it's something related that they're searching for open Microsoft SQL servers. To what end? Probably to exploit them in some way, but I'm not sure if there's a particular vulnerability that they're after there.
Yeah, well, worms get old, but they never seem to go away. This is a case where this scanning activity, we've seen this fairly regularly in the past. In fact, I was actually surprised when we started looking at this, how low the noise floor is. Typically, when I've looked at port 1434 UDP in the past, we've still had a reasonable amount of attack activity, basically scanning activity, that was basically noise, background noise that had continued associated with some remnant SQL Slammer infections. Perhaps some updates to the Microsoft SQL has fixed that up, made the vulnerability less susceptible. But in the case here, clearly there was some scanning activity that was taking place. I think what we've seen is that more recently where we've seen this sort of scanning, it's not necessarily actually the SQL Slammer worm itself, but using the same sort of technique to identify the same vulnerability, or at least identify where those databases exist, and being able to use that as a launch point for doing other exploit attempts. All right. Thanks very much, John. And for the entire team here today, just a reminder, if you have feedback, questions, or recommendations on topics to cover, you can contact us at cyberthreat@list.att.com. And another reminder, this program is available from the Tech Channel. That's techchannel.att.com. Also available as a podcast from iTunes. Just search for AT&T Cyber Threat Report. Similarly, you can find it on YouTube. Just search for AT&T Cyber Threat Report. And for the guests here today, actually regular participants, John Hogoboom, Dave Gross, Josh Lackey, I'm Brian Rexroad. Thanks for joining us.